Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Quest for Quarters. On episodes like these, I take you through underrated budget cards that you should be considering when you're building your decks. For these episodes, not only does every card have to be under $1, but they also need to be used in less than 4% of eligible decks on EDH Rec. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCG Player affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. My first underrated Quest Recorders card is Commune with Lava. Currently it's only 20 cents and sees play in just over 1,000 decks. It's an instant for X red and it says, exile the top X cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. In Commander, historically red has struggled with finding ways to gain card advantage. As of recently, red has gotten a lot more tools though with impulsive draw cards. But in my opinion, Commune with Lava is still a card that is still very overlooked. It is a fantastic spell that gives you temporary card advantage. It essentially gives you access to the top X cards of your library until the end of your next turn. The key to this card being until the end of your next turn. So optimally, you want to play this on the end step right before your turn. Because it's an instant, you can hold up mana during your opponent's turns and then cast it right before yours. You can put all of your mana into it and give you access to a ton of cards to cast in the next turn. Now, drawing a card is definitely better than impulsive draw in the long run, but in the short term, it's the exact same thing. And for a color that's historically struggled with card advantage, you'll take what you can get. But let's take a look at some similar cards that we can compare this to. First up, there's Light Up the Stage, which is also an impulsive draw spell. It costs 2 in a red, but has a spectral cost of red, and it says, exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So if you're casting it for that spectral cost, it can be a much better rate. But still, this card is somewhat limited since it gives you access to just 2 cards at sorcery speed. In my mind, I see Commune with Lava being more so like the red version of Blue Sun Zenith. Blue Sun Zenith costs X blue blue blue, and it says target player draws X cards, shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. When it comes to X draw spells, Blue Sun Zenith is one of the more popular ones. While Blue Sun Zenith might be more effective in the long run, there's definitely some drawbacks to it. Commune with Lava not only costs less, but honestly, it's much easier to cast. The jump from 2 to 3 colored mana symbols is a huge difference. A card that I actually think should see more play than Blue Sun Zenith is Pull from Tomorrow. It says draw X cards, then discard a card. Commune with Lava essentially is the exact same mana cost as Pull from Tomorrow. Pull from Tomorrow is going to offer you that long-term card advantage, but still, Commune with Lava should not be ignored. Red has plenty of ways of casting a ton of spells in a turn to make use out of those cards that it gets access to. There are plenty of decks that want to storm off or cast something like Mana Geyser and cast a ton of spells in one turn. And speaking of decks, let's talk about some decks that might be a good fit for Commune with Lava. Commune with Lava especially works well in decks that can produce a ton of mana. This can help for not only casting Commune with Lava for as much as you can, but also for casting those spells next turn. So some decks like Neheb and Roshin Meanderer are some fantastic spots for it. And Kaikar Wind's Fury is another great one as well. There are a ton of low-to-the-ground Kaikar decks that are looking to cast a ton of small spells. Sacrificing some spirits is going to be well worth it for that next turn. Although card advantage spells are getting better for red, Commune with Lava is still one that shouldn't be overlooked. And it's actually a spell that in some decks I prefer it over some of its blue counterparts. But try it out yourself to see how it can lead you to an explosive turn. My next underrated Quest Recorders card today is Bluster Squall. It's just 13 cents and sees play in only 1,000 decks. It's an instant for a blue and it says tap target creature you don't control and it has an overload cost of 3 in a blue. This is an extremely flexible card that can be useful in a ton of situations. At its base level, it doesn't do too much, but it can still be useful. Tapping down one creature can help you get through or help you prevent it from attacking you. But for just 3 more mana, you can tap down every single creature you don't control. That can essentially guarantee that you get your attacks through on another player or protect you from them. This card is useful both offensively and defensively and for a very low investment. Bluster Squall can both win you the game or save you from losing it. And there really aren't too many cards in Magic that can claim that. But now let's take a look at some similar cards to Bluster Squall. The first one that comes to mind is Sleep. Sleep says, tap all creatures target player controls, those creatures don't untap during that player's next untap step. This card is similar, but since it's at sorcery speed, it's much more limited and it's not as flexible. If you're using this offensively, it can be very similar. But defensively, it's just not as effective. If your opponents cast something that has haste, you're still going to be in trouble. Thanks to it being at sorcery speed, you also have to invest into it on your turn. Bluster Squall can be much more reactive, and unlike Sleep, Bluster Squall can be much more of a political tool. You can make a deal and help one of your opponents get through on another. In terms of defensive capabilities though, Bluster Squall is much more like Aetherize and Illusionist Gambit. Both of these are fantastic ways to protect yourself at instant speed in combat. Now, Bluster Squall is going to be different because you're not really setting someone back too far, but you are using it as a fog. On top of that, you do have to cast it more ahead of time. But as long as you're paying attention, for the most part, you're probably going to know when someone's going to swing big at you. And as I mentioned earlier, Bluster Squall is an offensive and defensive card. Both Aetherized and Illustrious Gambit are much more reactive cards than proactive ones. Bluster Squall might not be as effective defensively, but you have that offensive option. So what kinds of decks might you see Bluster Squall in? With its flexibility, it fits perfectly into a deck like Talrand. You can cast it for cheap to easily create a Drake or overload it to help you get your Drakes through. It can also work great in a political control deck like Feldergriff. You can use it to save other players for favors or help you get their hippos through. Even a Voltron-style build like Nezahal can use this effectively. There are plenty of great applications for this card, and it can be used in a ton of different archetypes. In my opinion, it should be seeing a lot more play than it is. Today's third underrated Quest Recorders card is Sandstone Oracle. Currently, it's just 18 cents in sees play in only 2,200 decks. It's a 4/4 Sphinx with flying that costs 7. It has, when it enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. Now, this card is definitely not for every kind of deck. Colors like blue and black have plenty of options when it comes to drawing, but colors like red and white can especially struggle when it comes to drawing cards. In Commander, there are plenty of decks out there that want to draw a ton of cards and keep a huge hand. Sandstone Oracle is a way to help even things out and take advantage of their hard work. Again, when you don't have too many options with certain colors and drawing, you'll take what you can get. In the right situation, in reality, this can draw you up to 7 cards. And 7 mana for 7 cards is a very good rate. And even if it just draws you 3 or 4 cards, it can still be effective. On top of that, you get a 4/4 with flying, which isn't too bad either. But now let's look at some similar cards that we can compare this to. First up, there's Slither Muse, which essentially can be the exact same thing, but in a somewhat different way. It draws you cards in the same way, but only when it leaves play, not when it enters. You can evoke it though to draw those cards right away. Now, Slither Muse doesn't see very much play at all, but for good reason. Blue already has access to much better card advantage spells. I guarantee you though that if Slither Muse was in red or white, it would see a lot more play. Again, colors that struggle with card advantage will definitely make do with what they have. Artifacts like Mind's Eye and Staff of Din are definitely examples of this. For colors like blue and black that have plenty of options for drawing, Mind's Eye and Staff of Din are hardly seen. But for colors that struggle, unfortunately they can be some of the better options. Now don't get me wrong, they can definitely be good in the right decks, but they're really not optimal. They require a good amount of mana investment and don't really help you out right away. Sandstone Oracle might not benefit you over time, but it can draw you a ton of cards at once. In these days, people are starting to lean more towards immediate card draw rather than draw engines. In many scenarios, having to wait for a payoff can just be too little too late. So we've talked about the colors that Sandstone Oracle can benefit, but what are some decks that might be able to use it? A deck built around artifacts like Duretti Scrap Savant can be a perfect place for it. Another red deck that it can help out might be Ilharg. In this kind of a deck, you can really abuse that ETB by continually getting it back into play. And another deck that can be really effective with it is Rakdos Lord of Riots. Even though Rakdos has access to black, Sandstone Oracle can really shine in this deck. If you can deal enough damage, you can essentially cast Sandstone Oracle for free. And this can draw you to more and more creatures to cast for free and can provide you a ton of value. As I mentioned before, Sandstone Oracle is not for every deck, but it should definitely be considered in more than it is. Today's final underrated Quest Recorders card is No Rest for the Wicked. Currently, it's only 50 cents in sees play in just over 400 decks. It's an enchantment for 1 and a black, and it says, sacrifice No Rest for the Wicked, return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. At just 2 mana, this card has a very low investment. You can put it on the battlefield early and leave it there for a long time. You can sacrifice it for free so you can get its effect anytime that you need it. In a lot of decks, this can be a fantastic piece of board wipe protection. And in other decks like Aristocrats, you can really get a ton of value out of this. You can sacrifice a ton of creatures for value and get them all right back to your hand. Now, you're still going to have to recast those creatures, but at least they're not gone forever. And the vast majority of decks would prefer to have creatures in their hand instead of in their graveyard. No Rest for the Wicked is a pretty unique card, but there are some similar effects. First up, there's Garner the Bloodflame, which is kind of like it, but on a body. When it enters the battlefield, return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from anywhere this turn. So this also includes discarding and milling, but essentially it's the same. But the main difference between the two is the investment. No Rest for the Wicked only costs 2 mana, and you can play it whenever. If someone wipes the board, you've got that board wipe insurance without having to invest any more mana. With Garner, you have to hold up 5 mana, which can be a lot. A somewhat similar card is Face Reward. Face Reward says, return to the battlefield all permanent cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So this affects all permanents and brings them right back to the battlefield instead of in your hand. But again, you definitely need to keep mana open for this. And 4 mana can be a lot to hold up when you don't know when that board wipe's coming. A card that's fantastic at board wipe protection is Heroic Intervention. It only costs 1 and a green, and it says, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Now, Heroic Intervention is for the most part much more effective than No Rest for the Wicked. It can help protect your permanents and keep them on the board. No Rest for the Wicked just brings your creatures back to your hand, but that can still be very valuable. But now let's look at some decks that might be a good fit for No Rest for the Wicked. First up, there's Muldrotha, which can be a great place for it. You can keep bringing it back and sacrificing it each turn if you want to. Another one might be Athreos God of Passage. Now, Athreos already has a way to bring your creatures back, but your opponents have a way to stop it. So having a backup plan to get some crucial creatures back is huge. Another card this might be effective in is Massacre Girl. Many Massacre Girl decks might wipe their entire board, but this will help you get some value back. Board wipe protection that you can put down and forget about is huge. That 2 mana investment early can have a huge payoff later in the game. And if you haven't seen my last Quest for Quarters episode, make sure you check it out here. And with that, our show is coming to a close, but I really want to hear about your thoughts on these picks, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future Commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget Commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.